Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Lisa Alastuey, and today I have a returning guest. Her name is Dr. Caryn Honig. She was actually my second interview on this channel where we talked about binge eating. And she came back again about a year or two later and talked about her wonderful organization called Run for Life, Poppies Run for Life. And so I'm so glad to have her back to talk about a movie review over the substance. Welcome, Caryn.
Good morning, Lisa. It is such a pleasure to be back for the third time.
Yes, yes. I love having returning guests.
We love coming back. It's such an honor.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so we saw the movie The Substance, I don't know, maybe like 2 weeks ago, and we walked out of the theater, and I think I apologized when we came out, and I thought, you know what, before we like debrief and talk about what we just saw, I was like, let's make a video about this. So we haven't talked about it. This is going to be our first time discussing it since we've had a little bit of time to kind of digest and marinate on some of what the movie themes were. So I'm so glad that we're finally sitting down and talking about it.
Yeah, me too. It took about 2 weeks for me really to process what the different themes were, what the message was, what that movie was all about. Because it was kind of a satire. It was a horror movie. It was a sci-fi movie. It was drama. It was tragedy. I mean, it was everything all in one.
Yes, yes. You know, I am notorious about not watching a movie preview because I feel like they give away so much of the plot and the storyline. Like I've already watched the movie if I just see the preview. So I didn't see the preview. So I didn't really know what I was walking into. I knew that I liked Demi Moore, the actress. I knew a little bit about the premise, but I had no idea about it being classified as a body horror movie.
I did not either. I had no idea. I really had no idea when you asked me to go to the movie. I was like, yeah, it sounds great. A younger version of Demi Moore. I mean, that sounds great. Let's see what it is. But I had no idea what we were getting into.
Exactly, exactly. So let's just kind of recap for the audience, if it's been a minute, what the story is about. Do you want to go ahead and take that?
I can start, and I'd love for you to jump in. So it's about a movie star turned fitness guru who turns 50 years old, and on her 50th birthday, she gets fired from her job, and she on the way home, let's see, she's driving home, she gets fired. She's kind of lost her identity, lost her mojo. She's not this shining star anymore.
Hang on one
And
second. You can see that screen, right?
yes, I can see it.
Okay,
Oh,
so
there she is.
yep, so her job is kind of like a Jane Fonda 1980s. They got the leotard, they got the leg warmers, and she's been had a very successful kind of Jane Fonda-esque 1980s career.
And I think there is a parallel there. Jane Fonda was a young, hot movie star, and as she got older, turned into a fitness guru as well. She had the make it burn, and she had the leg warmers, just that exact look. And she struggled with bulimia. Jane Fonda did. So I think there is quite a parallel there on purpose.
Mm-hmm, for
So
sure.
on the way home from, I guess, getting fired, she sees a billboard of herself being ripped down. And she's so distracted by that that she gets in a car accident. And in the hospital, they proclaim her, she's fine. But this nurse looks at her and he slips her a little DVD or a little, little note that said, check this out, it changed my life. And that was the beginning of her being introduced to this underground, dark world of using just unprecedented, we don't even know what the substance is, but it's a substance to to bring out this younger version of herself. Yeah. So do you want to take it from there?
Sure, sure. So basically, the substance is this activator, and it has some very explicit instructions on how to use it. And so every 7 days she switches from her youthful version, and then she has to go back to her older version. And
Mm.
so it's kind of like a fountain of youth activator. And so she's having a great time in her youth because it revived her career, but she kind of got selfish and she ignored the instructions because it said you are one and there's no exception. Well, she tried to extend, instead of 7 days, she did 8 days, or a couple hours at the beginning. And what it happened when you don't follow the instructions, it alters your appearance, her older version. And so she
Mhm.
started to show signs of really advanced aging. And so there's this whole back and forth of these two parallel universes that are happening within her.
And it's a symbiotic relationship. The younger version is putting back into the older version. Remember this from the back, they were taking fluid and putting it in. So one version is unconscious, but living, is hooked up to life support and food.
Mhm,
Um, and it's a symbiotic relationship and getting fluid from the conscious version of herself.
mhm.
So one's an unconscious, one's a conscious version of the same person. And then they're living off each other. So when the younger version steals from the older version gets older because
Yep.
she's taking the youth
Yep.
away. Yeah, and it
Yep.
starts with that grotesque old finger and then the toe as the younger version steals more time and more youth from the older version. Yeah.
Yes. And I also saw where the older version wanted to get revenge on the younger version. And so the movie is a body horror genre, dark comedy film. And there's a scene where she binges. And you being a binge eating expert, this is your registered dietitian counselor, you've worked with a lot of people. I thought that that was kind of a profound scene where she's binge eating and almost like punishing herself because she knows it's going to punish the younger
Right.
person.
Right, absolutely. And they wind up feeling such it's actually self-disgust, you know, about themselves. So the older version is so disgusted by the younger version's selfishness and, this want for beauty and how shallow she is. And then the younger version is so disgusted by the binge eating, the eating disorder part of herself, who really is herself. She becomes so they really just dislike what who they are, what they've become on both when they were younger and when they're older. Yeah, and really interesting, the older version is such a recluse. She has no family. She she really has nobody. She has her apartment, she has her memories, she has her star, her, star of fame. She has the big posters of herself when she was young and popular. And she has nobody. She's all by herself. And yes, her comfort, what she turns to is binge eating
Mm-hmm.
and binge cooking, right? And just overindulgence. And yeah, really interesting. And that's the way she copes.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So it was a really interesting movie. Lots of different scenes. I want to share one picture here, and this is going to spark some interest in our conversation because I think it was a very big scene. So
Yeah.
there was a scene here where she was getting ready for a date. And I would say it was an ego date because she was feeling down about herself and her changing looks and getting older. And she ran into an old friend, Fred, who I guess stroked her ego. And so she accepted a dinner date with him. And she's getting all ready and she looked beautiful. But then
Mhm.
she started to nitpick and she got in front of the mirror and she started to like worry about her chest. And then she just went into this really manic wiping her face, all that makeup off, and just like went like a 180 and canceled the date. And what are your thoughts about seeing that scene?
Yeah, it was so sad because She looked beautiful. She just looked so beautiful. You know, she had dressed up in this pretty red dress. And she looked fabulous. Her makeup was classy. She looked beautiful for an older woman, right? She looked gorgeous. And then she started nitpicking, like, ooh, it wasn't enough. The lipstick wasn't enough. The mascara wasn't enough. And by the end, she just rips herself to pieces, rips her face, not literally, but just the makeup is everywhere. She spreads it, and it is it's so showing like that older women, what the society expects from older women, right, is to look a certain way, this very unrealistic way that no matter how much makeup you put on, you're not going to look 24 years old or 25 years old, right?
Yep.
But our society, that's the expectation,
Mm-hmm.
that the more you plump and do, the younger you will look. And that's really sad. And I think what I found so interesting is that the movie portrays Demi Moore as being a 50-year-old woman who loses her job, right? And our society looks at like the Demi Moores, Jennifer Lopez, all these women as um, oh, they're beautiful for older women. But do you know what they've done to look like that? I mean, they've done so much plastic surgery. But what's interesting is Demi Moore is actually 61 years old.
Yes.
And they're portraying her as this, a 50. So she really does look a lot younger than she actually is. And she has had a lot of, work. And she just says that. She's honest that she has had a lot of work done.
Yep. Yep. That's the irony of this movie, because I think it does wrestle with, you know, beauty standards that are very difficult to achieve in our society. And people go to great lengths to get them so that they can keep the job or get the promotion or get the relationship or get the man. And so I think that, picking her was kind of interesting because it a little bit mirrors her life. She's talked
Mhm.
about in her book with issues on body image,
Mhm.
about, exercise, like over exercising to maintain a certain look, to get certain roles. At one time, she was the highest paid actress in Hollywood, so it definitely paid off. I mean, there is some motivation behind some of doing this that I can understand.
But it's also, it really does show, it teaches society really to hate that aging process, right? That, oh no, we have to hate this. We can't embrace it. We have to do everything we can to fight the aging process. It also kind of teaches us to hate ourselves, the every wrinkle that we get, every sag that we get, every natural change with the aging process, but we have learned to be disgusted by it, to really hate it. And then also then another point was that once you reach a certain age, you become invisible. You become not important. So she hit 50 and boom, it was over.
Mm-hmm.
You became invisible, even to the point where they were taking down her picture. That so you hit this age and all of a sudden you're out of childbearing years.
Right.
You're not young, beautiful, fit and all of that. And so we really do become this group of invisible people. I remember one of my good friends when she turned 60, she said, she used to walk into a restaurant and people would stare at her, men would look at her, and now she walks into a restaurant and she's invisible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of it's culture and social based. And so I know, you know, if you value that type of attention and you've put so much value on that type of attention, I can see how it's difficult to age. But if you have maybe go counter culture and have better perspective on it, that maybe I don't want that guy's attention anyway, or I want that organization's attention. You have to shift it to what I think, is going to make you feel good, and go to where you are received by people that do see you.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a great point, and to look at the women and the men that you admire, who do you admire them and why do you admire them? It's not because they're young and gorgeous and beautiful and don't have any wrinkles, right? It's because of what they've done and who they are and how they treat people. So we have to look at our priorities and look at, what's truly, truly important. And to celebrate the aging process. Like, gosh, look how much I've learned. Look how much I've grown. Look at all the experiences I've had.
Yep, yep. I
Yeah.
think a big theme in the movie is that she couldn't self-validate. And so she had to look for validation through her career, and that became her whole identity. And so I think, for a lot of beautiful women who maybe, ride that coattail, one day wakes up and realize that, okay, you're so much more than just what you look like, your outsides. And
Exactly. Exactly. And that is shown also in that very, towards the end when she becomes this five-headed monster with all of a sudden a boob falls out and an umbilical
the teeth
cord.
right here on the chest.
Yes. Teeth. And then remember their boobs, there were all these boobs hanging. And it is such a satire for the female body, right?
Mhm.
And even the umbilical cord comes out. And so it's almost saying like, oh, once you're past that childbearing, the childbearing years when you're young and beautiful and fertile, then you become this just, grotesque
Monster.
monster. Right, right. And so it really was making a point, with the boobs and the umbilical cord and the birth. It was almost like a birthing process that came out.
Yeah, I think the directors and the producers wanted to elicit a certain feeling in the audience. And when you were in the theater, we were looking around at the other people and like how uncomfortable some of the scenes were. I mean, there's a scene at the end where all that spewing blood coming off of the stage to the audience. It
Oh,
almost was, I think, an analogy of, just how far we have come. Like we might start off with a little Botox, but then you go to the extreme, right? And it just looks grotesque when
yes.
people get addicted to the plastic surgery, addicted to their looks, too much emphasis on their outside versus the inside. And so I
Oh,
think almost kind of like a double finger to the audience, like, here's the blood for y'all for buying into this culture that we
right.
in place because you can opt
And
out at any time.
And the blood with all the surgeries that women and men go through with the pain and suffering, it is not comfortable, to have these plastic surgery. It hurts.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of blood involved. And so it was very much a message. Like,
Yeah.
yes, it
Look
becomes
away.
grotesque, huh?
Yeah, like look away. We know you're going to look away. We're going to make it because this is happening in our society,
Yeah.
right? And people just would rather be in denial and look away. And they kind of pointed out because there were times I was like, oh, and I'm looking across and this person's not looking at the screen because it was intense.
Well, I missed all of the growth. I was like, Lisa, tell me when it's over. Tell me when it's over because it was so, so grotesque. It was so much. And then this other woman, we were just looking at each other like, is it over? Is it over? Is it over? I don't know how you were able to watch. It just grossed me out.
Yeah. Well, I kind of was like looking at the wall, but I could kind of tell when the scene changed. But you know, I had no idea that it was going to take a turn like that to that level to the monster level because she basically turned into what looked like a monster, like a freakazoid.
Yeah.
And so that whole like ending on stage and she's still being vain enough to show up even looking the way she looked. It was so wrapped up in her identity,
And with the mask of her younger self. Like,
right?
here I am. Look at me. I'm still young and
It was
beautiful.
her 50-year-old self.
Oh, was it her
She put
50
it,
years old?
yeah, she put a picture. So she's basically reckoning that, hey, maybe it's not so bad to be that age.
Oh,
You
gotcha.
know?
You see, yeah, it was okay, her 50-year-old self. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then behind her was also her 50-year-old self screaming. right?
Mm,
One of the heads was her like just screaming.
yep.
And then the younger version, her head was in there somewhere too.
Mhm,
And then that very old, hairless,
mhm.
hunchback woman, there were five heads.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
was to show that she's trapped in that trauma, trapped in that grief, because the movie is sad. There is a sad underlying message here, but what's behind the sadness is grief. Loss of youth, loss of a career, not accepting father time, not accepting, different stages of life.
and she was alone. She was all alone in this big, beautiful, kind of empty, modernistic apartment by herself,
Yep.
right? That, yeah, there was nobody else with her. She was all alone. And I think another message that really came across is just like we talked about, the lengths that women will go to, right, to look a certain way. And I read about the final scene with all the blood. It was like 30,000 tons or something, gallon, I can't remember, 30,000 gallons of fake blood. They were spraying it through a fire hose.
Mm,
And it was, I mean, so much. And it was for that effect, to just show the lengths that we go
hmm.
to look a certain way.
Yep. And I was thinking about like the movie genre. And so to me, it had a little bit of Death Becomes Her. That's an old movie. Do you remember that one?
I remember, was that in this,
With Goldie Hawn and
yes, in the
Meryl
80s?
Streep. And they're like getting older and their body parts are falling apart. It's kind of a comedy, but a dark comedy. Uh,
Okay.
and so it reminds me a little bit of that. It's like a mix of, and Carrie, remember that like
Okay. Oh, sure.
horror movie with all the blood, and then
Sure.
American Psycho. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. So it
Mm.
has, if you like kind of those very odd, kind of campy, Rocky Horror Show, because this might turn into one of those cult films. I can see what they were going for.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. It was pretty powerful. So I wonder at all, and I might be way out there, if the blood, it has anything to do with fertility and menstruation. Did you put any of that together, or did that come up for
Oh,
you?
now that you say that, maybe at the time I just thought it was more plastic surgery and kind of like in your face. But
Mm-hmm.
it's a very feminine thing. But I do know men also struggle with body image. We are seeing more men getting plastic surgery. And the fact of the matter, the substance can be anything. It could be steroids. There's a lot of young men in their teenage years that are taking steroids when they, trying to achieve something through the pressures that they believe are online.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I just taught a body image class yesterday. And if we talk about men, even if you look at the superheroes from the 60s, the superheroes were just these like normal, like normal looking, they had capes on and if you look at superheroes today, the little plastic superheroes, oh my God, their biceps, their triceps, their pecs are so developed. Their waists are more narrow. Even their chins are more chiseled. It's a totally different look from the 60s, to now in terms of the superheroes or whatever the superhero plastic dolls, like Barbie and Ken, those kind of superheroes. Men are feeling it too. There's just different, I believe, like where women want to look younger, firmer, tighter. Men want to look bigger, stronger, more developed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It doesn't discriminate for sure. But I think that somewhere in our culture, we've taken a wrong turn where we start to value these beauty standards that are going to, shorten people's life. But again, by choice, some of them like I follow the bodybuilding world, and Jay Cutler was Mr. Olympia, and he talked about him, you know, he's glad he won Mr. Olympia. He would change that in for shave a couple years off his life so that he could
Mhm.
be Mr. Olympia. So I mean, sometimes it's a value that people have and what they place on. And I mean, I believe everybody has a choice. But the problem is not everybody has Jay Cutler's genetics, work ethic, opportunities, so on. So, you know, it can send the wrong message to like, somebody else.
Absolutely. And as you know, as we're talking about body image and what the way our society is moving towards more extreme plastic surgery, more extreme surgeries, I also think of even though we have these movements that have come about, the health at every size, the Hayes movement, right? There are many, many fat activists that say, you know what? Yeah, health at every size. Fat is just fat. It's beautiful, right? We don't have to look a certain way, even though there are activists and there are different movements in our society. It hasn't changed. I really feel like the plastic surgery and the wanting to look a certain way is way bigger than any of the resistance movements that have come about.
And now you throw in Ozempic and shots, and now everybody can be thin and lose muscle mass in the process.
It is a complicated world we live in. It is a very, very much a complicated world we live in. Yeah.
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 So I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Dennis Quaid character.
Ha.
What were you thinking how they portrayed him, especially in the beginning scenes and the purpose of his character?
He did it so perfectly. He was so repulsive, right? He was such a just a disgusting character. And I found it interesting. One of the first scenes, he was eating shrimp. There's always this underlying like food message. And he was such a misogynist and had such a male ego and so belittling of women. He was just absolutely disgusting. And he would eat away with his mouth open. And he was just disgusting. He was greedy. He was just there's a political figure in our lives right now he reminded me of. But I just thought he played it so perfectly. And interestingly, there was another man who had this role who died. And
Oh,
so Dennis Quaid stepped in and took the role and I think did it just perfectly. I mean, you just hated him. He was so repulsive, right? Such the male ego. What do you think?
so yeah, I was like, oh my God, because they would do close-ups of him and show his teeth. And I think they were showing like, this is the boss. This is the guy on top. This is the guy that is the decision maker, has all the control. And it was shown perfectly, I think, in this movie, how a lot of women, you know, that dynamic, that power dynamic, especially
Yeah,
the younger woman, and him having all of the control. And if she wanted to play the game, she had to play his game, you know.
absolutely.
And she did, right? One of the famous lines, all pretty girls smile.
All pretty girls always smile. You are so right. And she just, couldn't do enough for him. I mean, she was just this small, helpless, little bird. You're right. And he had all the power. Yeah,
Yeah.
that,
I mean, if you want to play that game, she could always opt out. Here's the thing for women, have to own their side of the street. You can always opt out and say, I'm not playing this game. I'm not going to buy into this. I'm not doing this. And they can get their power back that way.
so why don't they? Why don't women, even today, why don't women stand up and say enough plastic surgery?
Some women have started their own businesses. Some women have, directed and produced their own films, in this case, but they had to get the power and the money first. They didn't
Mm,
have that. But
hmm
once they had it, I think there are some women that see that and are trying to give back.
hmm
But when you're younger, I mean, men too, you don't have a lot of money or power or experience or wisdom. I mean, it comes with age, and so um, they barter with their youth because that
hmm
is their only power.
This is true. This is true. It would take a lot of guts to stand up to society's norms and society's standards,
Mhm.
right? And to let your hair grow gray,
Mhm.
right? I have a sister-in-law who has no, she doesn't do highlights, she doesn't dye her hair. Her hair is 100% gray.
Oh, and it's
I mean,
beautiful. I've met.
it's, yes, you have. I mean, even I can't go there. So,
Mhm.
right, it would be really brave to say, no, this is the aging process. This is what I'm going to do.
And not be
When,
shamed for it, because Pamela Anderson recently came out bare face. She's not wearing any makeup, and she goes on the red carpet and so forth. And a lot of people have shamed her for doing that because she was such a sex symbol, right?
yeah,
When she
yep,
was younger, that people want to say, no, you're supposed to be that. You're not supposed to be that. But I think she's coming, where she's not seeking that outside validation. She's already made it, right? But it's refreshing to see somebody just, show up on the red carpet with no makeup. And she still, I think, looks beautiful.
absolutely. Jamie Lee Curtis did that in the 90s. And it was in all the magazines. She showed herself in her underwear and bra, and she pointed out, look, saggy breasts, flabby tummy, no makeup, flabby arms. And then the next page, they had all like the hairdresser doing her hair and the stylist and the cameraman doing the right angle. And they showed her in her, and they called her glam jam or jam, and they showed the contrast. We used that a lot in the 90s and early 2000s as look at how it, look what it takes to look like this. Jamie Lee Curtis, this is what she looks like when she rolls out of bed. This is what her kids see.
Mhm.
This is what society sees.
Mhm.
And
Yep,
it ain't the same,
exactly, exactly.
but we want to look like that. And our youth wants to look like the Kardashians, right? They don't see the Kardashians when they wake up in the morning or after all their plastic surgery when they're all bruised and swollen,
Right,
right?
right, exactly.
They see the Kardashians with the Photoshop and their Instagram has been, and that's what that's what they want to look like.
Mhm. Yeah, this is, like I said, where we've gone off rails. It's okay to want to feel good in your body, look good, feel strong. Like I put makeup on today for this, but I love going makeup free on the weekend. It feels
Mhm.
so good. So I mean, I think you have to find what works for you and to not be shamed one way or another, and to have a healthy relationship with yourself in the aging process, because you will go like Elizabeth Sparkle, that's Demi Moore's character. You will go crazy if you try to hang on to yesterday.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, and I think we need to put more role models out there like Pamela Anderson. I'm trying to think of who are just some
But one thing
natural.
about Pamela Anderson, yes, no makeup free, but she still dyes her hair. She's not letting she's 50 something. So trust me, she's got some gray hair there.
Yeah,
So again, I'm not shaming her. I'm just saying we can pick and choose maybe how we want to age and what that looks like, as long as I think it's a healthy message and you feel at peace with yourself. Because there
right.
are some women, they're in their 70s, they're fighting it, they're not at peace.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness gracious. Right. And let people be people. I mean, right? Let us age. There are other cultures that don't have, what America, what our country and the developed countries have. They don't have plastic surgery. They don't have Botox. They don't have dye. And I think the older generations in different cultures and different countries are very much celebrated, right?
Mhm,
Because of their wisdom
mhm.
and their
Yeah,
experiences.
I forget what island it was, but this was an island that was a little bit kind of shut off from the world. And then all of a sudden they started introducing like fashion magazines. They got access to like Cosmopolitan and Vogue, and they never had body image issues before that. And then all of a sudden when you introduce that, they started to see where people started to compare themselves, and they were like, oh, is this what I'm supposed to look like in the ideal? Without
Mhm.
even critically thinking, based on who? Based on
Right.
who is putting that forward? And you saw in the movie with Dennis Quaid and the scene
Mhm.
where he had all of his CEOs, CFOs behind all white men, right?
All white older men. Yep.
Older, all white men. And that has been, if you look at the movie industry and the fashion industry, that was the ones that were the controller of the power and the dynamics and the decisions of what the beauty standards should be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that study was the Fijian
Oh,
study of
thank
1995. Yeah. And so what they did was they brought in westernized television and also Cosmo and Vogue and all those magazines, but it really was the introduction of westernized television. It was like the Friends show and shows like that. And these Fijian young girls, the rate of eating disorders, purging, trying to control their weight, disliking their bodies, went up exponentially. It was unbelievable. And the older Fijians were just shocked at what is happening to our youth. They really very much celebrated voluptuous bodies until the introduction of the Western television and media.
you.
Yeah, that's
And
a big.
man, it takes it down to our reptilian brain that we can be so influenced so easily, especially at a young age. That those are some, developmental stages happening in preteen and adolescent that, can set up some very bad habits, some very bad thoughts into adulthood.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yep, yep.
Mhm.
So let's talk about the ending of the movie. If you recall what happened, so she was a monster, on stage and all the blood spewing, and she kind of just like disintegrated into this blob. And she
Mhm.
was hell bent on getting herself to her star, her Hollywood Walk of Fame star.
Mhm.
So her blob moves onto that star, and it's almost like she smiles. I'm home. I'm here. I'm in my adore me state. And then what happened?
And then the cleaning, the sweeper, right? The next morning, yeah, she is in her glory. This is who she is. The sparkles,
The
remember, it was
sparkles
like
came down.
diamonds. Yes, everything was great. She's smiling. And then a sweeper, a street sweeper, goes right over her and sweeps away her face. And then all that's left is her star.
Rack star.
The crack star. That's right. Big cracked. And that
So
was it. And then she was gone. She was invisible. Yeah. That was a pretty powerful scene. I mean, she did everything she could. She was dismantled. She was disembodied. Someone from the audience, remember, he had chopped off her arm. He came and chopped off her arm, and then she grew back something, and she limped, and she, bled, and she made it back to her star. I mean, that was that was her home. And
yep.
then just to be swept away,
Yep. I remember
forgotten.
turning to you in the movie and I was like, before it did the final scene, I was like, oh, she's gonna wake up from that car accident. You know how they always
Mhm.
do those twists. But no, that is how they wanted to end it. What did you feel satisfied with the ending?
I felt so sad. I felt like it was so tragic. Oh, that, you know what? Yeah, that was her whole life, that being the star, and then then she disappeared and she's forgotten. And that, she's forgotten because I felt that because she had nobody. She was all alone in this process. All she wanted, was her youth and her fame and to be loved,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And really, she was all alone. It was her face. That was all that was left was her head.
Yep, yep.
I felt sad. How did you feel?
Well, okay, first, have you ever heard that phrase that you die twice?
No.
So you die twice. The first time you die is when you die biologically, you're dead, right? The second time you die is when the last person that knew you dies. So your memory is going to be dead then, right? So, like, for example, do you know your great, 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 great grandmother's name? Anything about
Oh
her?
gosh, great, good, 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 good. No, I don't know
Okay,
anything
so,
about her.
right, right. So
Yeah.
you die so you have two deaths. So for her, and I think for a lot of celebrities, they flock to Hollywood. A lot of them had childhood trauma, Demi Moore included. I heard in a recent interview that her mother pimped her out to the landlord for like $500 when she was 15. Like severe trauma. She had some major
Yes.
trauma, right?
Yes.
And so anyway, so they flock to Hollywood, but you have that Hollywood Walk of Fame that really kind of like, I don't know, it kind of entices their ego, their vanity. Well, look, you'll live forever. You'll never be forgotten. Yes, your body will be dead, and everybody you know will be dead. But look, you're going to be on this sidewalk and you're going to live in infamy. And so,
Mm.
that is their whole goal.
And she got that, and she had that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you felt like she will be remembered. That she would,
Based
that,
on today's cultural standards, that we value the Hollywood Walk of Fame. We could go in and destroy that Hollywood Walk of Fame.
yes,
Wanted to.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. But yeah, that is a good point. But only, right, but only those who like knew of her will remember her. The next generations, they won't know who she is. They'll look at Elizabeth Sparkle. I don't know who that was. I know nothing about her. Like even like musicians from the 80s, I teach Pilates and sometimes I'll do 80s music, and I'll say, "Oh, that was Wham" or whatever. And some of the young students, Pilates students, they have no idea, who I'm talking about.
Yep.
So,
That's
yeah,
that's very true. Like, today's kids don't know who Marilyn Monroe is, right? I mean, she was a beauty icon that has been copied over and
right.
over again. But with the internet, with resources like that, they can find out who she is. But you're right. A lot of times, yeah, we are just dust in the wind. This life is very fleeting. And so I think that was another message is, what are we valuing in society and in culture? And maybe we need to reevaluate and go counterculture to a lot of these things that we are buying into.
Right. Right. And and how do we want to be remembered? Do we want to be remembered as, oh, she always looks so young. Oh, she had so much butter hair, she always looks so, beautiful. I don't know. Or do we want to remember by the acts that we've done, right? By the kindness, by the lives we've touched, right? Did we make a difference in someone's life? Did we stand up when something was wrong, right? Did we resist?
Mhm.
Did we take part in a resistance movement when things were really wrong? Yeah. So how do we want to be remembered?
Mhm. I think that's a big one.
Hmm.
So overall for the movie, how would you rate it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Oh, so I was thinking about that. I was doing it more like A to F since we're
Oh,
professors.
okay, sure. You could do it that way. How would you grade it?
I was giving it a B minus. How
Okay.
about you?
Okay, so that's a good one. When I walked out, I wanted to give it a C. When I walked out of the theater, I was like, oh, that was rough. That was tough. But then as I kind of like, wait a minute, I liked this about it and I liked that about it. And that was kind of entertaining. And since I'm not a horror fan, like I
Yes.
don't like horror movies whatsoever. I know to never go to them. I didn't realize this was a body horror film. So when I dropped that kind of thinking about it, I can raise it up to a B minus. Yeah.
Hmm. And it would have gotten higher had I been able to watch it. I think the messages were really powerful. I think the messages were spot on, but I think it was too grotesque for me. That it was super, super grotesque.
Yeah.
And I can't do which is why I became an outpatient dietitian, right? Is because I couldn't do the clinical work. I'm very squeamish.
Yep.
So I couldn't watch it. I just couldn't. It was grossed out.
Yep. Yep. You have to look away. Like I said, if you can sit through American Psycho, Carrie, Death Becomes Us, trying to think of like some other movies that kind of fit in that genre. Just kind of
But
like,
but Carrie didn't have splitting open bodies and all the oozing and body parts coming out, and there was oozing. There
it
were parts
was, but like I
oozing.
said, it was so absurd. It's so
I know.
absurd that it's
So,
funny. Like, come on, there was so much absurdity. You had to laugh when the teeth was on the chest or when her traumatized face was on her back, or it was so like, this is ridiculous, but it's kind of funny.
but this like splitting open, I could not watch this. I didn't watch it. I relied on you to tell me, okay, it's over. You can look now. So I imagined her back was splitting open. and she was birthing from her back a younger version, but I didn't see any of that.
Right. Like Alien, the movie Alien, there's like, you know,
Yes.
just weird stuff that I,
Oh, yeah, go ahead. But also, so the other thing was the music, right? So purposefully was very dark and loud, and dramatic. So the music added a whole, another level of suspense and horror and grotesqueness. I
Mhm.
just, yeah, it was a lot for me. So I think the message was great. The messages, the very many messages, if you can get to that, but the actual, like, I couldn't watch it, and I could only imagine and listen to you telling me what was going on.
Like I said, I kind of looked at the wall, but I could kind of see when the scene changed over.
God, that was, yeah. I mean, it was so absurd that, right, by the end, we were like almost hysterical laughing.
Yeah.
It was so uncomfortable, so absurd. I was watching the other people like this, crying, laughing because and it wouldn't stop.
Yep.
It
Yep.
wouldn't stop.
And I think that was, kudos to the producers and the directors because we all go to see films to elicit some kind of feeling, maybe a romantic feeling, maybe a hero story. This one is like you said, it's satirical, it's absurd, it's sad, it's grotesque. I mean, it's kind of takes you on a roller coaster ride when you watch this
Right.
movie.
I know, and there wasn't even any like romance, no sex and romance. Oh, well, it was a little sex when she hooks up with the young guy, but like, yeah, no love, no romance. There
Yeah.
was nothing fluffy about it.
No, no. Any other like little themes or messages that the movie showed that you would like to point out?
No, I think it was such a strong message about our society, and that our society does not embrace the aging process, that we fight the aging process, we hate the aging process, right? We ignore the aging population. I think it's told a lot about where our society is
Also, I
right
think
now.
there's the message of eating your young. Like women, I mean, women can be cruel to other women,
Mm.
especially younger
Yes.
women they feel threatened by. And they showed that because they did talk, they kept mentioning, we are one, you are one. So when you
Yes.
do that to them, you do that to yourself.
This is so true. And I've heard and I've seen in my practice, even mothers, just being so cruel to their children if their children don't look a certain way, or being jealous if their children look a certain way. So I've seen it both ways. I've seen these children just suffering because their moms thought they were too fat or too ugly, or wanted them to look a certain way, or the child is suffering because the mom is so jealous of the child, that the mom wants to look like the child.
A ton of projections, a ton of
Hmm.
projections in this movie. And it could be a conversation starter. Like nothing is going to get solved today from watching that movie, but hopefully it's sometimes through art that people can have conversations about difficult topics, whether it's binge eating or body image or aging or how you're being toxic or whatever. I think that these films have a place for that. I'm glad they're being made so that we can have
Hmm.
these conversations, but then it takes, well, what's the action behind it? What are some of the results and outcomes that can come from this?
Absolutely. And, we have to remember it was a symbiotic relationship. They relied on each other to feed each other,
Yep.
to keep each other going, right? What was the one fluid they would take from the back and put it into the other person? It was not the activator. It was, oh, I was like to just sustain, maybe sustain them. Um, but anyway, that we are, symbiotic. Let's treat each other. Let's treat the younger generation with kindness, and let's really
And the younger generation also needs to treat the aging population kind. Yeah.
absolutely. So let's treat each other with respect and love and kindness and gratitude and empathy and compassion, right?
Yeah.
Both ways. Absolutely.
Yep. I
Yeah,
definitely, that's the big, big message of this too.
for sure. For sure.
Awesome, Caryn. Thank you so much for coming on my channel and doing a movie review with me. I appreciate it. If you guys like this video and if you want to see more movie reviews, please put that down in the comments below and let us know some of your thoughts about the movie. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What lessons did you take away from it? And yeah, I'm glad y'all watched it. Thank you. Thank you, Caryn.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.